Good morning, Flowery Branch. I'm Carly Collette, and you're tuned in to Beyond the Charter. Charles Barkley is at it again. Charles stated once, he doesn't create controversies, he just brings them to our attention well. Racial profiling is his new topic.
We hold no responsibility for some of this stuff. It's just disingenuous.
They say the first step in overcoming a problem is realizing you have one in the first place. CNN's Dr. Sanjay Gupta weighs in.
How do you know you have a problem and you need a digital detox? Well, if you're watching this right now, you're probably pretty tech savvy, you got lots of different devices, and you may be somebody who is in need of a digital detox. It's when these devices start to control your life as opposed to making them easier. The area we find this impacts your life the most, and this may surprise you, but it's in fact your sleep. Find that people who are using their devices so close to bedtime, it creates an arousal in your brain that is so profound that it makes it much harder to go to sleep. It also affects your circadian rhythm overall. That's your sort of normal rhythm between light and night, and when that is disrupted, it just throws off your whole sleep schedule. One thing you don't realize is that simply by reading an email or reading a text message in the middle of the night, it can take your brain from 0 to 60 very, very quickly. And that brain is a very, very hard brain to slow down. It's generally a good rule not to be checking the phone, certainly in the bedroom or around your bed before you go to sleep. One golden rule that most sleep experts agree on is if you do get woken up by the phone or by something else, and you're awake, get up and walk around. Don't come back and lie in the bed until you're truly ready to go to sleep. So take a break, put on the out of office, put the cell phone away. It could help you live to 100.
When violence swallows a city as wholly as it has Kobani, as in so many of Syria's modeled cities, the fight becomes about who wins rather than what is left for the victor.
Taken down this street towards the eastern front line behind those curtains they're put up to protect them from snipers by Barfi and Media, who were two of the female YPG fighters escorting us down there. And this is near the eastern front where there's been much more intense fighting in the past 3 or 4 days. And while we get differing figures from whoever you speak to here about quite how much of the city is controlled, and you see here quite remarkable devastation caused by the explosives used, what's quite clear is that ISIS are far from giving up on this fight, in fact trying to take ground every day. Their move towards the official border crossing 3 or 4 days ago, that was a substantial advance they tried. They were beaten back, but each night, particularly last night, we heard very intense clashes further down this street towards the eastern front here. You can see the absolute devastation here as we get closer towards ISIS's positions here to the northeast of the city. Some of this caused by airstrikes, but some too from the daily constant, sometimes every 5 minutes, thump of mortars, some homemade by ISIS, that have been pounding into Kobani for months now. We can see Turkey literally just behind us, but here they're edging through this wreckage closer and closer to the places where ISIS are trying to push forwards.
As you've seen in these past 3 stories, 3 of the most interesting topics today are racism, technology, and military. All of these are affecting you at home as well as the people directly affected by these topics. These topics are some of the most important to us, and we'll be continuing to report on these as they become more relevant in our societies. We are definitely into this. And now we're going to cut to break. one day after executing dozens of non-Muslims in a quarry in Kenya, the Islamist militia group Al-Shabaab waged an attack in its home base of Somalia, killing at least 4 people, according to police, in an attack on a United Nations convoy.
The militant group Boko Haram is being blamed for killing dozens of fish traders in Nigeria. It happened Thursday in Borno State, close to the country's border with Chad. The head of the local Fish Traders Association says a group of 48 people was traveling to Chad to buy fish when the militants blocked the route and killed them. The official says the attackers didn't use guns, but slit the throats of their victims to avoid drawing the attention of multinational troops policing the area. In Kenya, meantime, police are in pursuit of Al-Shabaab militants who ambushed a bus near the border with Somalia Saturday. Officials say gunmen shot passengers who were unable to recite verses from the Quran. At least 28 people were killed. Kenyan security forces tracked down and demolished the attackers' camp. Al-Shabaab says the attack was in retaliation for police raids on mosques in Mombasa last week. David Gartenstein-Ross joins us now from Washington to talk about the rise of Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab. He's a senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Thanks so much for being with us. Boko Haram in Nigeria, Al-Shabaab in Kenya and Somalia. Are we seeing 2 facets of the same extremism?
We really are. These groups are very much on the same page ideologically. Both of them are committed to an extremist Salafist version of Islam. They're trying to impose religious law by force, and in fact, they have worked together in the past. Back in 2009, Nigeria engaged in massive counter-terrorism operations against Boko Haram, basically shattering the group inside of Nigeria. It had to scatter and find safe haven and support elsewhere, and they found support primarily from 2 other organizations, one of them Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, the other one Al-Shabaab in Somalia. So they do, in fact, have a history of working together.
Now, we're talking about the Kenyan governments, the Nigerian governments. At times, their responses have seemed similar, but at times very different. Most recently, we've been hearing about the Nigerians hoping for some kind of ceasefire. Have they had the same strategy? Have they had the same level or lack of success?
They've had different strategies. In the case of Kenya, they don't have Shabaab controlling significant territory inside of Kenya at all. Instead, a neighboring country, Somalia, has had Shabaab be a major force. A couple of years ago, they were the dominant force in southern Somalia. They've actually been in retreat. They don't govern as much territory, and the Kenyan defense forces were a big part of pushing Shabaab out of its last major urban stronghold, the port city of Kismayo. In contrast, in Nigeria, you've had Boko Haram basically rising in power over the course of the past couple of years. In Borno State, it controls the majority of territory, and the videos of what it's been able to do are awful. It's been able to implement its very strict version of Sharia law. They recently released a video which shows them undertaking a stoning, basically where someone is being stoned to death, and there's these crowds who are coerced to be there, quite obviously, who are cheering it on. Extraordinarily macabre.
Chuck Hagel has stepped down from his position as Defense Secretary after nearly 2 years on the job. While some believe it's a mutual decision, others believe he was forced out. Barara Starr brings us the story.
Visiting our troops in the Republic of Korea, thanking them for their service and answering their questions. And they asked about the usual topics, about our national security, the future of our military. And then one soldier, a sergeant from Ohio, asked him what was the most pertinent question of the day, which was, what was your favorite college football team? To which Chuck replied, born and raised in Nebraska, I don't have a choice. I am a strong Cornhuskers fan. Now, there was a time when an enlisted soldier might have been reluctant to ask that kind of question of the Secretary of Defense. But Chuck Hagel has been no ordinary Secretary of Defense. As the first enlisted combat veteran to serve in that position, he understands our men and women like few others because he stood where they stood. He's been in the dirt and he's been in the mud. And that's established a special bond. He sees himself in them, and they see themselves in him. And their safety, their lives have always been at the center of Chuck's service. When I asked Chuck to serve as Secretary of Defense, we were entering a significant period of transition. the drawdown in Afghanistan, the need to prepare our forces for future missions, and tough fiscal choices to keep our military strong and ready. Over nearly 2 years, Chuck has been an exemplary Defense Secretary, providing a steady hand as we modernized our strategy and budget to meet long-term threats while still responding to immediate challenges like ISIL and Ebola. Thanks to Chuck, our military is on a firmer footing, engaged in these missions and looking ahead to the future. Now, last month, Chuck came to me to discuss the final quarter of my presidency and determined that, having guided the department through this transition, it was an appropriate time for him to complete his service. Let me just say that Chuck is and has been a great friend of mine. I've known him, admired him, and trusted him for nearly a decade, since I was a green behind-the-ears freshman senator, and we were both on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. There's one thing I know about Chuck, it's that he does not make this or any decision lightly. This decision does not come easily to him, but I consider myself extraordinarily lucky to have had him by my side for 2 years, and I am grateful that Chuck has agreed to stay on until I nominate a successor. And that successor is confirmed by the Senate, which means that he'll continue to guide our troops at this challenging time.
Well, there you have it, Falcons. Another great day of Beyond the Charter. Be sure to follow us on social media at Beyond the Charter. I'm Carly Collette. Have a great day, Flowery Branch.